Before I begin, I'd like to state for the record that I'm not trying to sway votes in one way or another. My intention is solely discussing matters regarding real estate, which have been discussed and asked of me. I think it's important to discuss and have open dialogue on all topics and matters. Real estate is no exception to that. And these points have been discussed not only by the Liberals, but by the Conservatives and NDP alike. With that being said, I want to stick to this one point and prefer not to engage in discussions on different matters, policies, or views, and I neither confirm nor deny support for any particular party. And I think it's very important for all of us to go out and vote on September 20th. I encourage everyone to do so. Now for the questions. So this is interesting. The amount of taxes reduced by a tax credit, whether the amount is equal to $5,000 or $10,000, is in fact calculated based on the lowest tax bracket of 15%. So no matter what tax bracket you're in, this means generally you're going to pay 15% of that tax credit one way or another. This means that on a usual home buyer's tax credit, you would get $750 cash back. This will now be increased to $1,500, and this is on your tax return should you owe anything at all. And if you don't, then it doesn't really make much of a difference. While some may argue it's better than nothing, this increase does very little to help with closing costs. And not to mention that a lot of these policies may, in fact, increase prices to levels that would, in fact, end up bringing your down payment amount or expenses higher to begin with. So in a case like that, all the tax credit really does is balance this amount at best, at least in my opinion. So the thing with this is that it falls into provincial jurisdiction. And while the concept of having more supply is great, this plan does nothing to address the current issues with supply. It only focuses on future construction, and B, in many of the more in-demand locations, land is very scarce, and therefore the only places left to go are way past suburbs. I mean, we're talking suburbs of suburbs, which is ultimately countering the main argument of why go further? We will make it easier for you to buy something close by to your work and to your family. It's not necessarily the case, and I think it's important to have more information with regards to how they want to implement the increase in supply. So the fact is that these programs, for the most part, are geared towards middle-income families, individuals, and most people who are buying homes, don't invest enough money in high-risk portfolios, which is ultimately what will give the greatest incentive in not paying taxes on returns. At least they don't do it for their down payment amounts. This would be irresponsible as well because it's very volatile. And B, we already have a tax-free savings account at our disposition, up to $75,500 this year, which will be increased to over $80,000 in a few months. Most people don't even saturate that tax-free savings account that they have in their disposition. So what will another $40,000 really do if they're not even using their first $75,500? I think that it's a bit of a moot policy in that regard. So I argue that all this really does is drive prices higher. It incentivizes people not to maximize their down payments. With lower mortgage insurance rates, it ultimately increases the mortgage amount. And with the money not leaving the account as quickly, people are more inclined to be aggressive in a multiple offer situation because of this new incentive that has been given to them? It's a very tricky question, this one, and I'll admit I have personally been at odds with it, with the kind of year that we've had and everything going on, and what you see buyers go through, especially, like I said, over the last year. On the one hand, it's unfair to buyers to have to bid so high out of desperation without knowing how much higher they had to go versus the previous price. On the other, it's unfair to sellers to have that exposed and ultimately bring their price down, perhaps. But during a seller's, or rather a buyer's market, nobody cared about the hardships that sellers had to go through during sales. Now that the market is in the favor of the sellers, I find it unfair to penalize them as well for what is a natural state of economic affairs. Furthermore, I don't think it's going to be effective because whether exposed or not, it doesn't necessarily negate the bidding process. And I think sometimes it may actually prove to drive prices higher. The reason is because right now people are going in blind and they have certain misconceived perceptions going in. But if you see the prices up front, I think often people are going to be more inclined and encouraged to actually bring their prices higher. And I say that because I've personally experienced way too many times buyers telling me, we should have paid that. We should have went that high. But had you not known, you probably wouldn't do it before. So I don't really think that this does much to help with the affordability issue, again, which is ultimately what we're trying to solve. So my take on this is that the overwhelming majority of sales have not been influenced by foreign investment, if at all. Most foreign nationals would buy properties in cash, and wiring cash since the pandemic has been a real challenge. Not to mention the fact that immigration is at a standstill right now since the pandemic, and it will likely only resume in a year or two, which incidentally is the time that the ban on purchases from foreign nationals are lifted. In addition to the fact that there is already a 15% imposed tax on foreigners in cities such as Toronto, Vancouver, and while Quebec hasn't implemented it yet, it's not truly impacted by foreign investment. At least not right now and not from what we see. This is not what's driving our market currently. And purchases of permanent residents or citizens with imported money will not be affected, which, if anything, would have more sway on our markets at current levels. So I don't really see how this impacts anybody, any purchasers, if at all. So this plan has been confirmed to cost billions, and not just $1 billion, but a few $1 billion. Personally, I think we can do much better with this money than injecting it in our housing market, which incidentally only creates more upward pressure on prices, and it's not going to alleviate inflation either. It's only going to make it worse. And isn't that really what we're trying to avoid? Aren't we looking for more affordability for the middle-income citizens right now? Because the fact is, this is who most of these policies are geared to. And ultimately, by creating more, I argue, artificial wealth through the avenues of slashing CMHC rates, incentivizing people on tax credits, creating ways to increase purchasing power for individuals through new stress tests, etc., provided that they work. You're essentially creating more purchasing power, which in turn drives up the prices of the market, not down. All it does is allow people to take on heavier mortgages and bid house prices higher, and the market will definitely adjust for that. This is economics 101. If someone can afford $500,000 today because of these programs that would be implemented, but before could only afford $450,000, then the property which used to be $450,000 that the person was willing to pay $450,000 for can now drive up their price to $500,000 as it's going to have more demand and offers than before the incentives. None of these programs, in my opinion, tackle the real issues at hand with regards to affordability. We have a supply and demand issue in our market. Supply is low and demand is high for a multitude of reasons, which we're not going to get into right now. But this won't be solved by throwing money or the perception of money to people. They will just double down and be more aggressive when they bid next time around. The market needs to reach, in my opinion, equilibrium on its own terms. And these types of incentives are exactly what the government imposed when the pandemic started to curb a potential forecasted drop in demand, which proved untrue as well, which is exactly what brought us into this insane market to begin with. I don't believe doubling down and throwing more taxpayer money and incentives is the solution. More important than all of these, however, is the fact that the federal government, for the most part, with the exception of banking policies, including mortgage insurance policies, do not have the jurisdiction to make this decision. Much of what the Liberals propose in this Bill of Rights, which has been proposed by other parties as well, including the Conservatives, fall outside of the traditional limits of federal responsibility. According to the Constitutional Division of Powers, property and civil rights and all matters of local or private nature are considered provincial jurisdiction. Some of these points, as a way to bypass the provincial jurisdiction, such as the blind bidding process I was discussing earlier, are being proposed by the government to become criminalized. And I think criminalizing the way Canadians sell their home, which is an inherent right, in my opinion, is a major violation of their rights, to say the least. So I hope that sheds light on those questions. And by the way, I'm not saying I'm absolutely right. This is my opinion based on my years of experience doing this, based on what I'm seeing in the market with both buyers and sellers. I'm in it every day. I do think it's wrong not to ask the people who are in this industry their opinion, because we're the ones who really experience the ins and the outs of the buying and selling process. So you're putting these kinds of incentives, and I think that you don't see the full picture. And again, this is my opinion. I'm not here to stir any controversy or to even encourage anybody to pick one side or another. These discussions and these questions and these policies are in fact not geared only towards the Liberals or the Conservatives or the NDP. It's a discussion that's been had, I think, throughout all parties. And for that reason, I think this is a specific discussion that needs to be had in open dialogue with real estate professionals, and as well, even through discussing with people who are going through it. Once again, I think there is a real balance that needs to be had between the economy and the current state of affairs in our market. Thank you so much. If you have any questions or comments, feel free. Keep it clean and keep it respectable. Thanks, guys.